Hello wonderful person, this is Anton, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the Big Bang, but specifically about millions of years after the Big Bang, when the actual conditions in the early universe were good enough for life. Let's talk about this, and welcome to What the Math. Now this right here is the best representation of the Big Bang I could create. Unfortunately it's not perfect, but this is what we'll have to work with. The time right now is 377,000 years after the Big Bang, and we started to see early atoms like hydrogen, helium, lithium. They started to appear, and they started to kind of create what's known as photon decoupling, which then resulted in what we today know as the cosmic microwave background radiation, CMB. This is something that we can still detect even today, and this is something we'll talk about in one of the future videos. But basically, from about 377,000 years until about 1 billion years, this is where we reach a stage known as a dark ages. Essentially, things started to cool down, and there's still no stars, there's still no actual objects emitting light. But the universe itself is actually light emitting, and it's a kind of worm. At around 10 million years from now, the conditions change to the point where the universe becomes transparent and cools down to approximately 270 to 370 degrees Kelvin. If you know anything about the degrees, this is actually the temperature at which you can have liquid water. And this is what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to kind of zoom out of here for a second and essentially imagine that at this point, some of those elements might actually start coming together and form clumps of matter. And some of them might even create something resembling an early planet. Now, this is totally theoretically possible because that's around when most of the objects started to kind of form into spheres and basically created stars and galaxies and so on. But early planets already started to kind of exist. And because we are in the universe where the actual space itself is warm enough for liquid water, this would assume that if there was a planet that actually had any kind of water on the surface and possibly some sort of atmosphere made up of hydrogen, it would actually have conditions necessary for, well, liquid water. In other words, we could have had a planet that could have had liquid water and conditions necessary for life to survive. Now, all of this is definitely theoretically possible, and it's quite likely that there might have been an object just like this with actual liquid water on the surface something like 10 to 17 million years after the creation of the universe. There's actually at least a couple of papers that talk about this in a lot of detail, and they investigate this from a mathematical perspective and find out that yes, it's actually not impossible. And so statistically, a tiny part of the universe could have had actual conditions necessary for this to form and for us to have this early life form on this beautiful planet that has no name. Now, we don't really know if it actually happened or not, but there are ways for us to investigate if this is a reality. Now, let's actually just talk about one of these ways for us to study this. But before that, let me also mention that even after the universe actually cooled down and wasn't as warm anymore to provide for this planet to basically maintain its liquid water, even after this, when the universe basically became dark and cold and the planet probably was covered with essentially ice, it could have still had energy on the inside from geothermal vents, or possibly even some sort of an early star that may have appeared nearby to still maintain this life. So the life wouldn't actually just disappear as soon as the universe cooled down. It's quite possible that even after all of this, the planet still had conditions necessary for life to kind of maintain itself. Now, whether it survived for a long time or not is another question, but it's definitely possible. Now, how would we find out if this ever happened? Well, one of the ways of actually doing this is to try to look at signs and possibly investigate various stars that may have existed since this period, essentially, since the beginning of the universe. Some of these low metallicity stars actually do exist in our galaxy, and we can find them by looking at the center of our galaxy. If we actually find a way to try to investigate some of these early stars that might be in this region right here, we might be able to discover some early planets there as well. And we at least found on one planet that's already several billion years old. It's actually a planet I've talked about previously, known as the Methuselah planet. And this planet is definitely 12, possibly even 13 billion years old. So if we discover these objects and can actually study them near the center of our galaxy, we'll be able to find out if there was early life, and then possibly even connect it to the life on Earth. So there is a speculation that maybe, just maybe, early life actually began much earlier than we even think it was possible, and then spread across the entire galaxy via the so-called panspermia. This is when life is able to kind of take itself from one planet, like for example, if there's an asteroid collision that might have actually created some fragments, there's actually a fragment right there, and these fragments then end up on another planet and then end up in another solar system, and so on and so forth. Life could have actually spread across the galaxy and the entire universe in that way. So these are still speculations. We definitely have no actual physical proof of any of this happening, but the theory is there, and theoretically it could actually have happened. Whether we find out more about this or not is another question, because right now we just don't have the instrument necessary to study any of this. But hopefully in the future, possibly the next few hundred or thousands of years, we'll be able to know for sure where life came from and whether there was life 10 million to 17 million years after the Big Bang and after the creation of the universe. And that's kind of all I wanted to talk about in this video. And hopefully now you know what may have happened millions of years after the Big Bang and how life may have actually generated in the early universe. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Come back tomorrow to learn something else, and in one of the future videos we're actually going to discuss Big Bang in a little bit more detail and talk about some other potential unusual theories in regards to life and universe itself. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Space out, and as always, bye bye.